Hi, this is Ela, and I am going to talk about how do you paint trees. So this is for the plein air class, and I just wanted to bring us back to this exercise that we did in beginning watercolor, which is from the book, The Watercolor Course You've Always Wanted by Leslie Frantz, and just remembering how we started off, which was, figuring out where the ground was. If it is visible, it's not always visible. And then putting in the trunks and some branches and then some foliage on top. Now, sometimes you can't see the trunks, sometimes you can't see the branches, but if they're visible, it's a really nice anchor for the rest of the tree. So I'm going to show you some examples. I really like focusing, having that clear sense of where is it all beginning. And once you get the trunk established, and sometimes there's nothing but trunk and branches, sometimes there's nothing else. Once you get that established, right, this is done on Blake Garden, then you can begin to play around with the leaves and the foliage. So I tend to be more structured through here, and you don't have to draw every branch. You don't have to be as detailed as these are. It is really helpful to do some blind contour drawing and get that sense of being interested in the shapes and being interested in the shapes in between the branches. And you can have the branches go off the page, and then you have new interesting shapes that are being made in between those branches. Really focus and notice those shapes in between. And once you have that structure laid out, then you can go cuckoo bananas with the foliage. So there's this tension between tight and loose, and learning how to loosen up while you also have this structure going on. So I'm going to keep showing you more examples of what I'm talking about. Right? I'm getting really wicky-wacky with these trunks here. They're all drawn, but I'm really having a lot of fun with the paint on top. I have my warm colors. I'm not even coloring in the lines. And I have my shadows. And even though it's kind of a loose, wild painting, you can tell that the light is coming from the right because the shadows are on the left side, mostly on the left side of those branches and trunks. And the foliage is just kind of, it's on there. You can have backgrounds, you can throw salt on it. You can think about, if you want to think about what the shape of those leaves are, right? These leaves are a different shape. I'm letting these are clearly big leaves on this one. You can get descriptive and playful. You can do splatters. But you can really have a lot of freedom once you have your trunks and your branches laid out. And it's like anything you practice, the more you do it, the easier it will become. So I'm going to show you there's a photo of something I did plein air. Here's the actual painting. And here's a photo of the tree that I painted. And this is all very dark. I chose to play around to make it a little bit more different. But you can see I really got clear on where this trunk is. I got interested in it. It's very similar to drawing your hand. Look, what is this shape? What is that shape? And the cool thing about painting trees is they don't get offended if you don't do it right. No one's gonna get angry at you if your tree is not perfectly accurate. And the more you do it, the better you'll get. It's really helpful to do a blue sky beforehand. If you really are gonna have a lot of blue showing up in your picture, a lot of spaces, a lot of leaves showing through. You might want to do just a blue background, kind of like with this, right? We did the whole blue background first with the other gradations. I could just do a tree right over this right now if I wanted to, but I'm going to talk about this some more. This one I actually drew it first and put in the blue in afterwards. You have choices. So I didn't try and do the whole tree. I focused in, right? I mean, I'm about to like right here. I'm like cutting it off about right there to about right there, right? And then this is like, there we are. That's about how much is in this composition. You don't want to try and do everything. It'll just make you crazy. So here we go. I'm just gonna, this is how much I actually included. That's it, right? Maybe even a little bit closer than that. So you're simplifying, you're isolating your composition. You're looking at your lights and your darks. You're getting that shape down, loosely drawing it in. And one thing I also notice in class is that sometimes we have a hard time getting the color that you want, getting the intensity that you want. So maybe you've got a big puddle of diluted paint, and students will just keep running the diluted paint over and over again, hoping that it'll get darker, or really puddling it up. And what I encourage is if that happens, if you've got a big puddle of paint and you want to get darker, so let's say I'm going to make this greenery darker. It's much darker here. I like how much darker it is. I'm going to do that. I'm going to finish this picture. So I'm not going to keep messing with that big light puddle. I'm going to start over again and make a darker color. I'm not going to just sacrifice my picture just because I can't get the color I want. So I'm going to go with, this is ultramarine blue. This is sort of a sappy, sort of a green. I'm going to make kind of a more neutral green. I'm going to see what this looks like. I'm not going to go straight into the picture. I'm going to test it out, just like I always do, right? Here's a nice area where I'm already testing some colors. This is fairly dark. I could get even darker if I wanted to. I'm going to take a peek. See, I've got all my colors. I know what each color is. If I want to make it greener, I could add some of this, right? That's a greenish blue where my index finger is. I'm going to add a little bit of that in there, just to make it more of a true green. So don't just panic and haphazardly start painting, right? I know it's scary, but you do get to have some choice in this. You do get to do something and make a choice. So let's see, where's my reference photo? Where did I put it? I'm really good at hiding stuff from myself. Here it is. Here's my little bit of reference photo. So I like using my fan brush. I can do some stuff with it. Right, I can bring some dark color in there. And I can let it be loose and fun. Right? If I want to use a different brush, if I don't have a fan brush, I can use a small pointed brush. Do lots of little tiny dots. I can also use a more medium normal size. This is a 8 pointed brush. I can have fun with speckles. Look, instant randomness. Trees are random. Don't get too fussy. I can play around with different ways of doing marks. Don't get overly precious. Right? Get the value you want. Get really clear about where the lights and the darks are that you want. And you can do layers, you can do glazing. You can have fun with this. if there were flowers in this tree, I would, avoid some areas. Kind of like with this exercise, you can see I did this in class. I drew out this bush, and then I left some white spots, and then I colored some orange paint on top of the white spots, and there's some overlap. Sometimes it's on the green, but it feels like a bunch of flowers on there. Doesn't matter what kind. We're not worried about detail. We're being loose, right? I'm doing this all from photo because I'm doing this in a video, but we're imagining if you were outside right now, you do a layer, you let it dry. You do another layer, you let it dry. Right? If this color is getting too light for me, I'm going to put more ultramarine on there. It's gotten juicier. That's kind of nice. I'm going to try and, I've remembered how to make this color, right? I didn't forget what I did. Going back into this sort of sap green, olive green color. And then I'm going to go back into doing the same recipe as before. And if it's a little bit different, that's okay. It's okay if there's a little variation in there. And I can go in there. It's wet and, just, it's about slowly building and having fun and letting stuff happen and having some sort of sense of direction and also some sense of looseness. I hope you found this helpful. I know it's very intimidating being outside, but trees are not as scary as you might think. If you get that trunk down and those branches, and they don't have to be exactly right, but commit to whatever you've created. Get a pen in there and then let yourself begin to play with those leaves, and you can do multiple layers of colors just like I'm doing here. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you try this out on your own. Okay, bye-bye.